So then the subject that we have been studying is lojong, mind training. And there are so many different mind training lojong texts, and we have been using this particular text at the moment as the source of the teachings. And mind trainings is training your mind, as I mentioned already in the motivations, training your mind to become more compassionate, more kind, and to develop stronger bodhisattva mind, and to develop wisdoms by using whatever different situation that we encounter in our life. Sometimes good situation, sometimes not good situation, sometimes joyful feeling, joyful experience, sometimes painful feeling, painful experience. Sometimes things go the way we want, sometimes things does not go the way we want, it goes opposite, all of that. So we encounter many different experience, different situations, and whatever situation, whatever experience we experience, how to utilize that experience, whether it's a joyful experience or painful experience, whether it's a pleasant, unpleasant, using that as a tool to develop more loving kindness, compassion, bodhisattva mind, and more wisdom, to open our minds. Sometimes things does open when we become kind of, sometimes narrow-minded, until we face certain situation and that open up your mind, And so how to utilize that to, and especially when things are not going so well. Especially when things are not going so well in our life, how can we utilize that experience, that situation, and turn into something positive? How can we utilize and transform it into something positive? It's like, as in many sutras says, it's like, how to make the lotus blossom from the mud. So difficult situations are like the mud. But from the mud, the beautiful lotus blossoms. And some lotus, you need the mud to grow it. And similarly, how we can blossom our own lotus of loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta, and others through the mud of those difficulties. And sometimes those are necessary. Just as for certain lotus, the mud is needed. Without that, and for some of us, we don't learn until we go through it. Some people, like some lotus, maybe they don't necessarily have to be grow in the mud. And some of us, some people can learn a lot of things even without having to go through the pain, the sufferings, without the difficulties. It is possible, but some we have to go through it until we really understand and really learn the hard way, And so therefore, understanding this is the opportunity for men to grow, instead of being kind of despair, instead of being demolished, instead of being devastated and overwhelmed by whatever seeing, oh, this is an opportunity for me to learn, to be stronger, to become more compassionate by understanding my own situations, thereby understanding the situation of others. And if we look at a lot of the people who have been kind of like role models and inspiring role models for the world, whether we took at Mahatma Gandhi, whether we took even in this country as a leader, Martin Luther, whether it is Nelson Mandela, whether it is His Holiness Dalai Lamas and so many other beings, they become such an inspiring, great model leaders and continue to touch so many people's heart, and they will continue to touch and inspire in many, many coming generations because they face themselves a lot of difficulty and they went through the struggles. Without those struggles, they will not become who they are. Mahatma Gandhi, he was a lawyer in South Africa. Only when he was discriminated, he was thrown out of the train. He shouldn't be where the white people were. And he was thrown, so he felt the discrimination. And that is when he started to fight for the right of minority, or people who are discriminated. That is where his political kind of career started. Otherwise, he would just be a normal lawyer who might have made some money, but he became one of very inspiring in terms of struggles, non-violent struggle, not only for the India, but Martin Luther was very inspired by him, his non-violence method. His Holiness Dalai Lama was very inspired by him. He always talked about that. There's so many leaders who have choose to struggles for the rights of the most vulnerable ones, for the right of injustice, but by following non-violence method. And that, so many has inspired, and he will continue. They will continue to inspire in even after thousands of years, if the human beings are still in this world. But it will continue to inspire. And so what I'm saying is, to raise above ordinary, sometimes we need to go through the struggles, and therefore those struggles, those difficulties are the source. If we use it properly, they become the opportunity and source to raise above ordinary for all of us. And always when we are in that kind of struggles and challenges, always reminding ourselves, this is opportunity for me. This is opportunity for me to become more stronger, to go further, whether in our spiritual path or to be more compassionate, to be able to do more for the societies, to raise above ordinaries, and become a source of inspiration for others. If not so many beings, at least within our own families, within our own friends, so we can inspire them through how you deal with that situations, through your own example, just by your families, your friends, observing you, how how you deal with that struggle, how you positively deal with that struggle, difficulty, give them hope, give them a encouragement that they can also see, oh, you don't have to be so overwhelmed, so devastated, so demolished with all of those challenges and difficulties. You can overcome that, you know. So not only we are able to help ourselves, but to be able to inspire so many beings. And those are the best way of teaching them, you know. As I always say, you know, our example are the best way to inspire them to on a spiritual path, on the path. If you want to inspire them, if you want them to practice. And so, yesterday, you know, I went to one of the talk. There was a training for the chaplains, you know, at Upaya, and there were some panelists, all from different Christian nominations, you know, and one of them, Rick, is my friend, and so he said that he will be in panelists, and he's talking. So I went, and all the panelists, you know, from different Christian, and they all are chaplain. One from Los Alamos, one from Albuquerque, one from, two of them from Santa Fe, and someone asked, you know, how they got involved, and again, you know, the story, they come, all of them engaged in this chaplaincy in different departments, hospice, police, and all the different, because they themselves went through a lot of struggles. Again, that was what inspired them to follow this particular path, and why they decided to follow this particular path in the chaplaincy, for example, in there, was because, you know, all of them has gone through a lot of struggles, a lot of one of them, you know, went through cancer 4 times, 4 stages of cancers, and all of that. And so, and because they themselves went through a lot of struggles and a lot of pain, a lot of difficulties, they felt kind of being, from Christian point of view, called to do this job so that others people can have less struggles, you know, through that other people, maybe they can be some help that they can, they don't have to go as much as struggles if you have some support, help in that way. And so that is the story of a lot of people around the world, you know, who has been very example inspiring of them. A lot of them, they were inspired. A lot of them, they were inspired to go in certain direction, to be helpful and benefit for not only themselves, for the society, for the others, because of themselves going through a lot of difficulties. And so they were able to turn that around, something into positive, you know. And we all have that potential. We all have that potential, you know. And so reminding that all the time is very, especially when we are in difficult, painful situations, is you know, reminding ourselves. And it will be very difficult to remind ourselves when you are in that state, unless you are so used to do that all the time. Do you get it? Because we remind that all the time, even with the small things. We always remind, oh, this is the opportunity for me to improve, for me to learn more, to grow more, to be more stronger, to be able to more benefit and so forth, you know. So if we keep on reminding that, and that is part of training, you know, meditation, repeating in your mind, recollecting, reminding yourself all the time. And because of that kind of training, habitude, way of thinking, familiarity, then even when we are in difficult time, you will be able to remind that. And when you are able to remind that, we will be more likely to see that way. But if we don't train that every day, when things are difficult, then it is very difficult to be reminded of that, you know. And then it is difficult even when you're reminded to be able to be positive and look something positive from positive mind, you know. And life is all from what kind of eye you look on, you know. Not the eye of this eye conscience, but the eye of your mind, you know, attitude. If you look with a depressed mind, everything looks dark. It doesn't, even though it is not as dark in outside, because of your mind, everything looks dark to you. Everything feels dark to you. Everything feels very negative to you. Everything looks very negative to you. Not necessarily because that is in the outside world, but because of your state of mind. In same way, when you have trained your mind and when you have positivities in your mind, you can find positiveness even in difficulties, even in pain, even in suffering. You can always see something positive in that. As there is a saying, you know, if you look at torn eyes, you see everything torn. If you look with flower eyes, you see everything as flower. The world. And so that is the key, you know, how the world reflects to us, how the world appears to us, and how we relate to the world. More than the external world is from what state of mind we are looking at it. If we look at certain state of mind at this time, it's very depressing. But if you look with different mind, it might not be as depressing. There is a lot of good things as well, positive things as well, you know. And as I say, sometimes we learn the hard way, and maybe the world has to learn the hard way, and has reached a point where it is coming to that. So we say enough of enough. And in that sense, maybe it's a positive, you know. Sometimes when things are good, we don't try harder. Do you get it? But when things are bad, then everyone started to work harder to make change. And that was one of His Holiness always kind of tells Tibetan peoples, you know. He says, he mentioned many times, he said he noticed that Tibetan people are very resilient and when things are going difficult, they can become very resilient, they can be very united, they can stand up. But when things started to become going well, then they started to fall down, you know. And I think maybe it is not only the Tibetan, I think it's generally we human beings. When things are going then we don't take so much. For example, when the climate was in not a bad situation, we think, oh, everything's fine. Nobody really pay attention to it. When it come to the bad things, then it started to pay attention and trying to do. That is where, if we are pay attention earlier, maybe we don't have to do so much what we are trying to do now, because it is very small scale. Things are happening, and it is easy for everyone to take actions and fix it with a small scale. It's like, instead of saying you have to give up 3 meals, it is saying you have to give up 1 cup of tea a day, which seems more easy to do that. But now it is saying you have to give up 3 meals a day, and that is difficult. Similarly, that is, and so when things are going well, we don't, it's same with our health, isn't it? When we feel healthy, we don't take care of it in terms of our exercise, in terms of our diet and all of that. When we are sick, then we started to do all of that. And then sometimes it's difficult. But if we have taken care of it before actually we are in that state, properly it will have been much easier to take care of it. And so that is the case, and so that is kind of like our very kind of, seems like very nature of responding that way. And therefore, maybe it is a good that when some things are not going so well, then we are being inspired to do harder, and so that we don't get kind of distracted and careless without paying attention. And so that is one way of looking at things. Okay. And so that is what we have been kind of studying, practicing with these verses. And we are at the point where, having cultivated the bodhicitta mind, then engaging both practice such as sixth perfection, and last week talked about the practice of generosity. No. And then second, the practice is the practice of perfection of moral discipline. And it is explained in some of the commentaries, the sequences, the way Buddha explained those 6 perfections, that way is each of earliest practice are easier than others. The practice of generosity is easier than practice of moral discipline. The practice of moral discipline is more easier than patience. And so that is how one reason why the sequences they explain that way is for the earliest, the previous practice are more easier than following practices in one. And also each of those practice support the next level of this practice, through the practice of generosity, if we learn the practice of generosity, and if we are good at practice of generosity, to be able to share, to be able to give without any kind of clinging and grasping attachment, that is one of the main purpose. There are many results of practice of patience, generosity, when it's done properly. Of course, as I mentioned before, is a expression of loving kindness, compassion. And so it helped to also improve the loving kindness, compassion to practice with generosity, to feel connected with others. Also, it is also a practice to let go of greediness and attachment and clinging to the objects. So when we learn to practice generosity, then you have less attachment to the objects, less clinging to the objects, less grasping to the objects, less attachment to the object. When you have less attachment, less clinging and grasping, then it becomes more easier to practice moral discipline. The reason why we are unable to, why the practice of moral discipline becomes difficult for us is because of we have a lot of clinging, grasping, attachment, a lot of objects. For example, killing animal, or even human beings, killing animal mostly if we are killing it for sports, fun, you are attached to that fun, sport. If you are killing for meat because we are attached to that meat, the flavor. If we are killing it for the skin, for fur, because we are attached to that, whether it's the warmness, whether it's the way it looks, whatever, because we are attached to those different qualities of that, that is why people continue to take the life of others, and they cannot refrain from taking the life of others. It's like struggle between, should I give my fun, attachment, or am I okay taking someone's life for my own satisfactions of my attachments? Same thing with stealings. Why do we steal others? Because we're attached to that object. We want that object to us, whatever that object might be. And the reason why we are unable to restrain or refrain from stealing, for example, taking that doesn't belong to you, is because we're attached to it. So if you have less attachment, it will be easier to you to restrain and refrain from it. And so that is why how each of those practice, when you are good at the post practice, how it helps to the next level of the practice as a better foundation. And so that is also one of the reasons that sequences also explain in that way. Then the train in the perfection of morality. Since without morality, one cannot accomplish one's own welfare, wishing to accomplish others' welfare without it is source of laughter. Therefore, it is a practice of conqueror children to safeguard morality without aspiring for existence. So, generally speaking, moral discipline or ethical discipline that is kind of taught in Buddhism, because I think every spiritual path has their own what it means moral, immoral, moral practice or immoral, ethical practice, not in, even in secular, maybe there are different views on that, not only there is a different view on different spiritual path, also maybe within the secular world, there's a different view where what is ethical, what is moral, what is not immoral, what is ethical. And so here we are explaining more from Buddhist point of view, okay, that we have to kind of understand so that and I think whether it is, even though we might have slightly different view on what is ethical, what is moral, unethical, unmoral, whether in secular world, whether it is in a spiritual world, even though we might have different which actions are moral, immoral, and so forth. But I think overall, all of whether it's secular or whether it's spiritual, their intention is to help the individuals to become a better person and to help not to harm and hurt others. And definitely that is the very foundation for the Buddhist moral or ethical point of view. That is, and as we will go through, Um, mm, so first of all, maybe so what is moral discipline or ethical discipline from Buddhist point of view is, uh, you know, is to refrain and restrain from engaging into what we call 10 non-virtuous actions. Um, basically, is to restrain and refrain from your body, speech, and mind that could harm and hurt others and yourself. And if we kind of contains those actions, then it can be contains into those 10, even though there are more than that. Any physical or verbal or mental actions that could hurt and harm others and oneself, we try to refrain from that. And that is, and then it can be limitless actions of that. So then it kind of Buddha explained by condensing them into the 10. So, physically taking the life of others, stealing, engaging in sexual misconduct, verbally restraining, refraining from telling lie, engaging in divisive speech, whether it's telling lie, divisive speech, whether it's within the two individual or group, and harsh speech, and idle idle, meaningless gossips and talks. Those are true speech, and then mentally, restraining, reframing from having a covetous mind, ill will feelings, attitude, and wrong views. And maybe when it comes to wrong view, maybe again there might be different kind of opinion, view according to different spiritual, maybe different spiritual path, and maybe even within the secular, but here we are talking more from Buddhist point of view. Mm. So, and so not only restraining, reframing from that, then actually engaging into 10 virtuous actions. Instead of not only restraining, reframing from taking the life of others, saving the life of others will be the virtuous action. Not only restraining, refraining from taking that which does not belong to you or stealing that, you learn to practice generosity and give to others. It's not only restraining and refraining from sexual misconduct, but you started to live in a more better, healthy, and also helping others to live in a better, healthy relationship. And then not only restraining from the lie, being honest and truthful, not only restraining from divisive, engaging in the speech that brings individual society together. Even those who are divided, how to bring them together. And that is, again, I think we have to do that, very, very important. Especially now in this world, this country and the whole world has become, in recent time, very divided. And we don't want to create more on that divisions through our speech, through our writing, whatever, all these things. You know, it's a time to, it's a time to bring together. You know, sometimes we do divisive speech without even being aware that you are doing that, not being mindful enough. And sometimes we intentionally do that, which is even worse if you look from spiritual point of view. Not only in spiritual point of view, even you look from ordinary point of view, you know, more division, more means more bitterness with each other, more resentful with each other, more angry with each other. That means you experience suffering, others experience sufferings, and everyone experiences suffering because there's so much bitterness, because there's so much anger, we cannot find a common ground to find a solution to the problems. And so the problem is never being addressed. Why we are unable to address? Because we cannot find common ground. Why we are unable to find a common ground to discuss something, to come to a certain point where you can find a solution to the problem. Everyone knows there is a problem, but everyone's either my way or your way. And because we don't trust each other, because there is too much bitterness, too much distrustful, because there is too much anger, and therefore we cannot trust each other. When we don't trust each other, we cannot find a common ground. And therefore, as a consequences of that, everyone suffers. The problem that should be solved is not being solved. And it all comes from the more we are divided, the more that is going to affect. It's not just one person or one group that is being affected by that. Whole country is affected. The whole world is affected by that kind of atmosphere, that kind of environment. And it's always, do I want to contribute for that kind of environment? Do I want to contribute for that kind of atmosphere? Or do I want to kind of, at least from my side, I don't want to contribute that. Even maybe I cannot change everyone's views and everyone to, but at least from my side, maybe I can stop contributing that energy with my speech, with my thoughts and all of that, you know, on one hand, we complain about everything, but again, on the other hand, we are contributing the energy, you know. We think, oh, I'm just a spark, and that is big fire, and you feel you are not contributing, but we all are using spark that create a big fire. Mm. And so that I was talking about the divisive speech and harsh speech, you know, refrain from the harsh speech, you know, and sometimes those harsh speech are even much more worse than physical abuse, you know. Sometimes those harsh speech and harsh words can devastate someone's hope, someone's courage, someone's self-confidence. And even though it seems it is just a word, but it could destroy someone's life. Mm. Some of those harsh words can be much more painful than even physical injury. And so therefore, not only refraining from the harsh speech, but engaging in the more gentle and kind speech through, and either with ourselves, with others, um, learning to be more kind, gentle, mentally, verbally, and physically, Sometimes we also has to be positive to ourselves, kind, gentle, compassion to ourselves, even on verbal level, Sometimes we curse, what you call curse, whether others are ourselves with the negativities, with negative words and all kind of things. And that only kind of inflame the negative feelings, thoughts. So how our thoughts can impact our word, how our word can impact our minds, and also others as well. So, always training, learning to be using on mental level more kindness, more compassion, more caring, oneself and others, and on verbal level also trying to be more gentle, more kind, more compassionate, more caring, and physical level as well. Mm. And then, not only reframing from, meaningless, idle gossips, but engaging in more meaningful, more beneficial that could help you and help others. Instead of engaging in all this conversation that increases our delusions, instead engaging in a conversation where it can reduce the delusion and where it could increase our positive thoughts, positive attitude, and so those are the kind of the and then that was and then on the mental level, coffeetiousness, when you see something good, then you always want for yourself, always wishing I wish that I could have that one for myself, that then that increases and reinforces our attachment, our greediness, you know the more you kind of think that, the more you have that attitude, the more attachment you have, the more greediness you have, and so it increases that more desire, more craving, and when we are under the strong influence of desire and craving, then we are not happy, instead of enjoying the tea, your desire, your craving is, I wish I could have something else. And so you don't enjoy this because your mind is preoccupied with thinking about the other objects that you want, you desire. So your mind cannot be in the present. Your mind is always goes towards the future, what you want, the object of your craving and desire. So your mind is running after that object, so you can't be in present. Therefore, you cannot really enjoy whatever object there is in the moment, in the present. Mm. And that is, and due to the, as I mentioned, due to the attachment, then we engage in many other unhealthy actions. Oh, I think I have to stop for a time. Okay, we have short. Okay, thank you. So coming to the verse itself, here it says, since without morality one cannot accomplish one welfare, wishing to accomplish others' welfare without is a source of laughter. What it kind of means is, in order to be help and benefit to others, the best kind of the best basis to be a health benefit to others, if we can be, is human beings. Animals can be helpful, beneficial for others, but very limited. It's hard to think one animals kind of benefiting the whole, all of them in a broader way. Whereas human beings with their particular mind, intelligence, and cognitive ability, one person can make a huge difference to the society. One scientist can make huge difference to the society. One doctor can make a huge difference to the society. One spiritual leaders can make a huge. So in any other departments, we can make a huge benefit to sentient beings. And so therefore, the best rebirth or the basis to be a beneficial to others is to have a human life, human rebirth. And in order to have a human rebirth, according to Buddhism, the main cause to have a high rebirth, such as human beings, is the practice of moral discipline. So you don't have a practice of moral discipline, pure practice of moral discipline, then you don't have the cause and condition to have a higher rebirth as human beings. And if you don't have higher rebirth as human beings, then it is even very difficult to take care of yourself, for not talk about benefiting others. And you can see, the only other realms that we can see with eyes is animals, And of course, animals have their own way of protecting themselves, their own of defending themselves, their way of surviving, and all of that. But if you relate with the human beings, they still does not have same abilities, to even protect themselves. When they are injured and wounded, they have certain way of kind of curing themselves in some way, sometime, but they don't have the same level of human beings, where they can go and ask and doctor, and through that, whatever care they can be cured. Or no, the animal does not have that. And even with your pets, sometimes they cannot always communicate correctly with you what they want, in order to kind of take care of their own welfare. they do have certain way. They want to go out. They are hungry. They want to go and pee. They have certain way of communicating it to let you know that, but they are very kind of limited. You know, if they have some kind of problems, health problem, they cannot communicate what they are having problems. With human beings, sometimes you can say, I have stomach problems. I have this problem, and thereby they were able to kind of get the right kind of help immediately and whatever. So in that way is limited in that, and so therefore, and especially, you know, if you want to be the greatest help and benefit to all sentient beings, then only when you become fully enlightened, then you can be the most benefit and beneficial to all sentient beings. And in order to achieve that fully enlightenment, you know, you need to have the practice of 6 perfections, the practice of moral discipline. And even to have individual liberation, still you need, you know, the practice of wisdom and meditative concentration and moral discipline, the 3 high training. These are the basic and the necessary practice to achieve that. And so therefore, to be more help and benefit to oneself and others, you need a practice of moral discipline. Without that, it will be impossible. Therefore, is practical children's safeguard. So therefore, practicing the moral discipline, you know, without aspiring for existence means, you know, without being attached. For example, so in order to become the practice of moral discipline itself, of course, someone can, because they want to have higher rebirth such as human beings, and therefore the cause of that is the moral discipline, then they engage in practice of moral discipline, such as the practice of small scope, you know. That is someone practice in order to being kind of to have inspiring to have a higher rebirth. So in that way, is someone is still aspiring for existence. You know, here what is saying to become it at the perfection of moral discipline or practice of bodhisattvas, you should practice the moral discipline not because of being attached for your own higher rebirth or your own individual liberations, without being attached to that. But of course, in order to be more beneficial to all sentient beings, we have to be fully enlightened, and the best rebirth to achieve enlightenment is a human rebirth. And therefore, you want to have higher rebirth in order to be more benefit to others. So when you have that motivation, then you are not attached to the cyclic existence. And so that when you practice morality, and any of those 6 perfections, you have to practice that. The motivation to practice is to be benefit to others, to be help to others, not for your own personal, because this is a bodhisattva's practice. So therefore, it shouldn't be driven by your own personal well-being, just your personal well-beings. Okay, and so that is what it is saying in order to become the practice of without aspiring for the existence. That it means. And then I want to kind of, and then when it comes to the practice of generosity, perfection of perfection of morality, moral discipline. In many of the Buddhist scripture, they talk about 3 types of moral discipline. And so here I'm in one of the Tibetan master, Panchen Rinpoche, you know, one of the Panchen Lama, in his one of his prayers, He said, inspired me to perfect transcendental moral discipline by keeping, even at the cost of my life, my self-liberation, bodhisattvas, and Vajrayana vows, and collecting good deeds and helping others. So through that, there are three. So as you explained, there are three level of kind of practice of the moral discipline, of the perfection of moral discipline. One is, as I already mentioned, reframing from those 10 non-virtuous actions and engage 10 virtuous actions, as well as reframing from breaking whatever precept that we have taken in relation to self-liberation vows, or in relation to bodhisattvas vows, or in relation to Vajrayana vows, whatever different type of precept we might have taken individually, trying to observe them, trying to keep them without breaking them. And that is one of the moral discipline. The other moral discipline, as it is saying, collecting all the virtues means, engaging the other practice of other perfections, by reframing from selfish attitude, by having the attitude to benefit and help others. Out of that motivation to be help and benefit to others, then engage in the practice of other practice, generosity, patience, joyous effort in virtues, meditative concentration, wisdom, and so forth, so that those other practice of perfection that you have not practicing, those who have already practiced, trying to increase, improve, get better in them, in that, and so that. And then the other is to, with that kind of to restrain and refrain from having a selfish attitude, and out of the attitude to help and benefit others, then engaging in the actions, such as in one of the sutras, the Buddha talked about 11 different ways of helping and benefiting others. But of course, it is not just 11. There can be thousands and 100,000 and billion ways of helping and benefiting others. So whatever out of that, then working for the benefit and well-being and welfare of all other sentient beings. And that is, so here when it comes to the Bodhisattva practice, when we say restraining, reframing, as because the practice of moral discipline, restraining, reframing from certain attitude and certain actions, and the difference from others' moral practice is here is the Bodhisattva practice, the moral, not only reframing from such the non-10 virtuous actions, but also reframing from selfish attitude. That is one of the Bodhisattva's practice. Reframing, whatever practice you engage, whatever virtue practice you engage into, trying to engage with the intention, attitude of being help and benefit to all sentient beings, and reframing from having this selfish attitude. And so that is the, and so when we train, first we train, while we try to train to restrain and refrain from having a selfish attitude, as well as to have any harmful thoughts and so forth. But at the very beginning, when we learn, first we try to learn to restrain from harming physically, and not only physically, slowly, we try to restrain and refrain from hurting and harming oneself or others, not only physically, but also verbally. Then slowly, not only we try to restrain and refrain from hurting and harming others and oneself, not only through physical and verbal, but also mentally. Even having bad thoughts or hurting and harming others. eventually we are able to restrain and refrain from having harming or hurting, not only on physical level, on verbal level, but also on mental level. At the moment, it is even difficult to restrain, refrain from even from the physical level and verbal level for us, you know. But the training is that we start with the more easy one and then go on more difficult, more subtle. We start with the more gross, more difficult, more easy one, and then that is the way we practice. And then started to go working with the more subtle, more difficult one, and then even more subtle and more difficult, eventually all of them. And so that is, and then also reframing from having any selfish attitudes. And in that way, so that is how we train in moral discipline. And when you have a good moral discipline, when you have a good practice of moral discipline, when you are able to refrain or restrain to hurt and harm physically, verbally, and mentally, then it is easy to practice the patience. The next practice comes, the perfection of patience. Then it becomes easy to practice the patience. It's difficult to practice the patience at the moment because we still have a, bitterness, resentful, anger, and we want to hurt and harm them back for what they did to us. And because of that strong emotions, so therefore it's hard to practice the patience. But when you have no more or less of the thought to harm and hurt others, then practice become, or patience become easy. Even when people are not kind, even when people are not kind to you or others, still you don't have any negative feeling of wanting to hurt and harm them back, wishing them bad, Sometimes when we think hurting and harm means like really, really ill will feeling, it doesn't have to be that, Sometimes we wish bad for someone. That itself is hurtful, harmful thoughts, And so then that how you can see how that practice helps to the next level of practice of the patience. And in order to have a stronger practice of moral discipline, the more we have better understanding of the functioning of law of cause and effect, the more better practice, the stronger our practice of moral discipline will be. How our actions through body, speech, and mind, whatever those different actions, how those negative, unhealthy, negative, hurtful, harmful action through body and speech, how it brings more pain and more suffering to others and oneself, or both. The more you have that understanding, the more you will try to refrain from engaging in such actions. I give you one of the example, which I always kind of, probably some of you might have heard about it, even without an understanding of karma, the law of causality, someone can be a kind, compassionate. They can live kind, compassionate life. It's absolutely possible. And there are a lot of people who doesn't believe or who doesn't have any understanding of karma, law of cause and effect, but who try to live their life, compassionate life. kind life. And unless you have really, from whatever spiritual path or from whatever tools, that unless you have very strong tools to deal with that, even you have that intention and you try to live that, sometimes we are unable to live by that when you started to feel the unkindness of others, cruelty of others. When you started to feel meanness and cruelty of others, and then your belief of wanting to live a more compassionate life, kind life, become a little bit shaky, And sometimes you see people from being very, trying to live very kind to turning into very aggressive, violent people. Even though they had a good intention at the very beginning, and they have tried to live that, but they have been challenged by individual circumstances, and they couldn't deal with that, and then they themselves become sometimes very violent and aggressive. And even you don't become very aggressive and very violent, still sometimes people then thinks, what is point of trying to be a compassionate and kind if you get that kind of result? This is how others are going to treat you for you being a kind and compassionate and generosity. If that is how they treat me in that way, why should I be compassionate? Why should I be generous? Why should I? And so you started to change your mind. Do you get it? You see a lot of time. Maybe we have some experience, but we see a lot of people who have tried to live that at the very beginning, but when they are challenged by that kind of circumstances, then they become shaky, and then their direction goes in different ways, other ways. They are unable to kind of stay in the same path with that kind of strong mind. But if we have really, deep and profound understanding, not just a concept, but through practice, meditation, if you have shown deep, profound understanding, realization of karma, no matter how much challenging it is, you will never try to harm others. You will never try to hurt others, because not only you are hurting and harming others, also the consequences, it will come back to you too. So it's possible not, but absolutely it will come. The consequences of that, you will experience consequences of that. Therefore, even if it is challenging, you will not be careless about it. That is the difference. And I always give this example of, traffic, because I see quite often how people behave differently when you're driving in traffic. I think generally speaking, every citizen, they would like to follow the rules. Nobody want to break the laws, okay? Whether it's traffic laws or other laws or rules or other laws and rules. Everyone wants to follow all the rules and regulations as much as possible. But they do break in certain circumstances, situations. And always you break with the hope you will not get caught. If you are 100% sure you will be caught, even when you are in a rush, you will not do that. And I have seen, There are certain area where camera, there are certain area where the police are staying. Everyone know that. And no matter how busy they are, they will slow down there. The area where they know there is camera, area there where know there is police, they are more careful, cautious, and they try to, even they are in rush, they try to slow it down. But where there is no camera and when there is no police, and especially when you are in rush, sometimes even when you are not rushed, you try to people try to go over speed. But especially when you are in some rush, then you definitely people will overspeed it that. And so our behavior, different behavior. One, when you are sure there is camera and police, you are sure going to be getting ticket. And then there is case when you might or might not get it. You take the risk. And that is same in many, I'm just giving a traffic example, but that is case in our life. And that is the way that if we have profound understanding, realization of karma, it's like the police is always there, camera is there. You wouldn't take any risk because you are going to get tickets all the time, no matter. But when you don't have that understanding of karma, then you might think, well, not sure. It's like you are taking the risk. And that is the difference in our practice, in our response, in our actions, in that the difference. So therefore, when we have that strong, profound understanding of the karma or law of cause and effect, then we are more cautious, we are more careful, we are more mindful in your practice of reframing from the harmful and hurtful actions. Will be more, you will be able to do more, better, and you will be able to restrain and reframe better, and more easier to do that, and all of that, I know. So that is, and I think it was Atisha, one of the, again, great Indian masters around 11th centuries. He said, the practice of morality is to refrain from harming others and help others. The Bodhisattva practice of morality. And the practice, that again, we have to understand, the practice of morality in essence, in a very deep essence, is based on understanding. Is based on why do we try to restrain and refrain from such actions, body, speech, and mind. We do that by understanding, no one wants to get hurt. No one wants to get harmed. And such actions and behavior lead to hurtful and harmful experience. On the basis of that, main practice basis of that, of the practice of moral discipline, especially from Bodhisattva moral discipline, that is the thing. That is the basis for that. That is the main basis of understanding. Just as we don't want to get hurt and harmed by anyone else, same way, no sentient beings, no living beings want to be hurt and harmed. Therefore, because of such, if I engage in any of such actions, it will bring hurtful and harmful experience, either to both of us, or either to others, or either to myself. And one sentient being is going to hurt. Even others not going to hurt, I'm going to get hurt myself. So therefore, one of sentient beings is going to get hurt. A lot of time, most time, both of us are going to get hurt and harmed. So with that understanding, then we try to refrain from any action that could lead to such a harmful and hurtful experiences, painful experiences on many different levels. So that is the, so again, when we practice the moral discipline on the understanding of that, then it reinforces and increase our loving kindness and compassion, sense of concern for other sentient beings. Okay? Why you want to refrain? Because you want to hurt and harm any sentient beings. Because you care about sentient beings' well-being, their happiness. And so when you have that kind of attitude of sense of caring and concern for the well-being of other sentient beings, then that is like giving a water to the the plant of your compassion, loving kindness, so it grows. It's giving water. It's when you have that kind of attitude, concern, then that state of mind. So each time we do that, it is giving water, and your goodness of loving kindness, compassion grow further and further. So it helps to increase the loving kindness and compassion. As well as loving kindness and compassion lead us to act in such a way or live in such a way. So again, each of those practices enhance each other's, help each other's. The practice of the perfection of morality help to improve, increase, develop loving kindness, compassion. Loving kindness, compassion help us to keep our moral discipline better, and so. And that is the one of the things I know. The more I think about it, the more I feel the beauty of all of those practices is they are so interdependent, interconnected. How each practice help other practices. Once you have a good practice or good realization, one of that, how it helps to develop other realization, other practice. The problem with us is not having one of them. It's like a puzzle, you know. If you find the right word to the puzzle, then you can solve all the things. Do you get it? Not finding that the right words, the main words to kind of solve the puzzle is the key. Once you have that, then it leads to here, 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 everywhere. Then everything becomes easy. Similarly, when we have one realization of any of those lumbering topics, subjects, if we have one realization, that could help to develop, enhance all others practice, but not having one of them become more challenging. So what I'm trying to say, sometimes when you study and when you learn and that, you know, there is so many practices, and sometimes you wonder, you know, how am I going to complete all of those practices? So many overwhelming. But as I said, when we engage in one practice strongly, and if we can have one realization, then all others become easy. You know.